All right, everybody, welcome into Hockey Sense, man. We're at it again here on a Friday. It's our Friday tradition brought to you by First Community, the only place to do your banking. First Community. And they already have branches in O'Fallon, including a branch inside the O'Fallon Walmart Superstore now. The Super Center. It's open 7 days a week. Where else can you do your banking 7 days a week? They're going to have another O'Fallon branch coming up soon as well. First Community understands that life can get expensive this time of year. You got the holidays, you have other year-end expenses, your paycheck doesn't go as far as it typically should or would. Inflation, all of that. We're not going to get political on this show. But wouldn't it be nice to hang on to a little more of your money? And that's why First Community offers Skip a Payment. It's a program that allows you to skip your next car loan payment using their mobile online banking app. It must be in good standing with your loan, and a processing fee does apply, so give yourself a break and skip your payment this month. First Community wants to make your life easier. Well, are they ever? How about that? Skip a payment. We love that. First Community, proud sponsor of what we do here on Hockey Sense. Man, the Blues lose last night in Buffalo. They now hit the road. They play Boston. They've got some back-to-back games coming up this weekend before they come back home. A bad loss. I'm not going to sugarcoat it last night. Second straight game that the Blues had a third period lead, only to lose the game last night. At least they get a point in overtime. A little bit of controversy down the stretch with Jordan Kyrou not playing the last, 5 minutes of the game. A couple other guys didn't play down the stretch either. I don't think Kapanen saw a whole lot of ice. I don't think Matthew Joseph saw a whole lot of ice in that third period as well. You had Oscar Sundqvist slide up to play with Neighbors and Buchnevich, and that did not go well. I mean, Sundqvist had a real tough time in the third period. He got beat out of the corner, then in front of the net on the goal that was disallowed, and I thought it was a good call. I don't love the call, but it is the rule. If a player goes into the blue paint without being pushed in, and then they don't come out of the blue paint, then guess what? That is goaltender interference. Even if you make just the slightest contact with the goaltender, it doesn't matter. They're going to call that goalie interference every single time. It's not the defenseman's responsibility. In this case, it was Ryan Suter who was at the edge of the paint. It's not his responsibility to let him out. Keep him in there. In the event what happened, which is Buffalo scores and then you can challenge it, no goal. So, hey, listen, that's the rule. I know it surprises a lot of people. I don't love it because it wasn't crazy contact, didn't fully impede Jordan Binnington, but he did just enough to make an impact on the play. So that's where we're at with that situation. But the Jordan Kyrou, listen, I understand his deficiencies in his game, but I will say, and if you truly watch with an open mind this season, you can see that Jordan Kyrou has made a real effort to give more effort on the puck, on the wall. His 50-50 battles have been much harder. And, you know, he's not a liability out there defensively. I know he will turn pucks over, and we saw him do it. Recently at home, he had a terrible turnover late in the game. Trying to remember who that was from, against Utah, right? That was inexcusable. You go back to the Philadelphia game. I listen, the puck bobbled on him. It jumped on him. You can say bad ice or whatever. And that's a turnover. It is what it is. Is it even a turnover? I mean, the puck bobbled on him. The Blues were in decent defensive position to still negate the play, going back to the Philly game. And even in the Utah game, it was a bad bounce, kind of a lucky goal that went off of Colton Parayko when he slid to break up the 2-on-1. I thought Kyrou was having a good game last night. He hit the post in the third period. That could have changed the game. That could have won the game for the Blues. It's a game of inches. And he showed some speed, had a nice assist on the Buchnevich goal. And it wasn't just the drop pass, but the fact that he was able to create space for Buchnevich by continuing to, skate through the defenseman and not allow him to gap up on Buchnevich and take away the shot. And it was good to see Buchnevich score. It's great to see Brandon Saad score a couple of goals. They need these guys to start pumping some goals in. It can't just be Kyrou and Buchnevich every single night, even though Buchnevich isn't scoring every night. I think that's his first goal in how many games? I mean, I think his last goal before that was the empty netter against Toronto. You can correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe I am wrong. All these games kind of melt together. So he's got to be more productive from a goal-scoring standpoint. Thought it was interesting that Ray Ferraro, prior to the game, says that Pavel Buchnevich playing center looks like a player who's trying to emulate a center. He's trying to look like a center. Well, it's not his natural position. And I think he is trying to maybe overcompensate in some areas. But, at the end of the day, from the red line in, he's just got to play offense and use his natural offensive instincts and try to make plays. Limited without Robert Thomas in terms of, being able to truly use that creativity, that give-and-go game that, Thomas and Buchnevich have shown over the years. They've got great chemistry with one another, but with Buchnevich playing center, even when Thomas is healthy, they haven't been on the ice a whole lot together. The head coach, Drew Bannister, he'll try to get them some shifts together, but even on the power play right now, you're not seeing those plays that are created off of the seam passes, and it's not just the seam passes from dot to dot that lead to one-time opportunities, but it's the seam passes that are a little bit closer to the net where it allows you to get those backdoor chances that Kyrou can be so good at when receiving those passes from Robert Thomas. And Thomas obviously has the vision to be able to create and make those plays. So they miss him. The good news is Thomas is obviously on the bench. He's on the road trip. Not on the bench. On the road trip, he's skating. Once you start skating and start practicing, the light is at the end of the tunnel. So I think the timetable 6 weeks out was early December. He's going to beat that timetable. I said at the beginning that even though it was kind of a 6-week timetable that was given, 4 to 6 weeks, and there was some talk that they thought that maybe they could get him back closer to 4 weeks as opposed to 6. And it looks like that's the schedule and the timetable that we're looking at for Robert Thomas. I just hope they don't rush him back when he's not ready. You don't want to have him get a setback or suffer a setback. You want to, allow him to get back into the lineup and do his thing. Same with Philip Broberg, who I think will require closer to 6 weeks versus the 4 weeks. Different injuries. His injury is probably going to take a little bit longer versus a fracture in the foot for Robert Thomas. And I say fracture in the foot and be specific with his injuries because we saw the puck hit him in the skate. We saw the replay. I don't want to get specific on Broberg's injury. He got tied up with Mitch Marner, a little bit of a different situation. But that's where we're at with those two guys and what a difference the team it makes when you don't have those two guys in the lineup. But I didn't like Kyrou not playing towards the end of the game. It's different if it's the last shift or two. If we're talking the last 60 to 90 seconds of a game and you want to close things out, I get it. But you know what? He brings speed. He can get pucks out. He can get pucks in. He can score. It's not always a bad idea to try to extend a lead and try to score and put a team away. He was getting chances. I thought he looked dangerous, and Buffalo's not great. They're missing Tage Thompson. They're missing the number one goaltender. So they were shorthanded too. They're not a very good team. They're young. They're inexperienced. You can tell from a confidence standpoint they're fighting it, but now the Blues are fighting it. They look fragile in the third period. To give up a lead in back-to-back games, I felt like you're just kind of sitting on a lead. And I know Drew Bannister said, well, we outshot them 8-7, but if you really look at how the game was played and the flow of the game in that third period, Buffalo controlled the game in the third period. They had the puck the majority of the time, and they were on their toes. I just thought the Blues were on their heels. And so to put Oskar Sundqvist up there with Buchnevich and Neighbors, I understand the thought process. I do. But I thought he went to it too early. Do it a little bit later in the game, deeper in the third period, when you're really trying to close it out. Otherwise, now you're just hanging on. When you make that switch, when he did, you kind of send the message that you're just hanging on. You're just looking to play defense and trying to get out of there with a 1-goal lead. And the Blues got, some life with the goal being disallowed. So a different type of loss compared to what we saw a couple of nights ago against Boston when they had the 2-0 lead. But again, in the third period, it's 2 games in a row. I thought they set, they sit back a little bit too much in the third period against Boston as well. You look at who's taking offensive zone faceoffs and stuff like that. I mean, there's just little things, the game within the game that you can start picking apart and paying attention to. You want to play to win. And I know they want to win. But, sometimes you just got to You got to trust your guys. And I'm not saying he doesn't trust Jordan Kyrou, but in last night's game, he liked a different look better than having Kyrou out there with Buchnevich. And again, I understand. Jordan Kyrou has, made some mistakes. He's turned pucks over. But at the end of the day, he's your $8 million player. He's one of your best players. He's an NHL All-Star. You need to be able to trust him late in the third period against the Buffalo Sabres. If you can't trust him against the Sabres, I don't know when you're going to trust him. So I'm not going to pile on. It was a tough loss, and I thought it was a tough point to give away. A couple other things late in the game. I don't understand why the Blues didn't pressure the puck more in the last minute of the game with the delayed penalty. I know Sundqvist looked gassed and some of these guys look tired. Get off the ice, get some fresh bodies out there who can pressure the puck, and get a whistle so you can eat into that 2-minute power play. You're not going to give them a full 2-minute power play. Any team would rather have a 4-on-3 versus a 5-on-4, and now they get the 4-on-3 for a full 2 minutes in overtime. Alex Tuch, he breaks his stick right before the goal is scored. He had to leave the ice or go to the bench to get a new stick or leave the ice for a line change. Now you're looking at a 3-on-3 situation in zone because Tuch's leaving the zone, and that's where you got to pressure the puck. You got to get that puck out. And I thought Parayko played it a little bit soft there. Maybe you could have pinned him against the wall and get some support, dig the puck out, get it down the ice, and just try to live to get this 2-minute power play over and get this thing back to 4-on-4, or 3-on-3, I should say, for the overtime. The Blues never touched the puck in overtime. So those were a couple of misses where I don't think the Blues read the play very well, whether it's the bench, whether it's the players on the ice, wherever you want to point the finger. They didn't read the game as well as they should have, both when the delayed minor was taking place as well as the broken stick from Tuch in that situation. I know you can't run around and leave the middle of the ice wide open, but somebody's got to help out Parayko there. Parayko's got to play that harder, try to get the puck down the ice, win that puck battle along the boards, and find a way to force them to come back up the ice 200 feet. So those are just a couple of the plays. So listen, I get it. The Blues are shorthanded, and sometimes we don't evaluate it as such. But I think there's some things you can probably do to give yourself a better chance. That's one of those games, I hate to say it, the Blues lost that game versus Buffalo winning the game. It was a hell of a shot by Rasmus Dahlin. He's a first overall pick for a reason. He's a good player, really good player. And they've got some other young good players on that team. But Buffalo, at the end of the day, they're just okay. They've beaten some good teams, but they're just okay. And the Blues look right now like they're just okay. We've got lots to get into. Darren Dreger is going to join me here in just a couple of minutes. We'll go around the league with Dregs. I'm looking forward to this for sure. We'll talk some McDavid. Gets his 1,000th point last night in less than 660 games. He's more than a assist per game player in his career. This guy is absolutely incredible. 2,000 points is within reach. How many points will he end up with? How many goals will Alex Ovechkin end up with? Who's on the hot seat in terms of coaches around the league? You look at Boston, they lose again last night. In Dallas, they get pummeled. They give up 6 goals in that game, early in the game. What's going to happen there with Boston? What's going to happen with Brad Marchand? Is he going to sign? We've got a lot of other issues. I'm curious to hear Dreger's take as to who he may look at as some surprises to make these 4-nation rosters. What he thought as of the former Swedish coach calling out Erik Karlsson. Could Sidney Crosby find a new home this year? Cam and I have been talking about this for over a year. Finally, others are catching on. And now we are starting to talk about Crosby potentially getting moved. They signed him. Are they going to move him now? I don't know. We'll get into this with Darren Dreger on the other side. Hockey Sense is always brought to you by First Community. I mentioned skip a payment. Ask them about that. Go to firstcommunity.com. Ask about Little Blues. Get your son or daughter signed up for Little Blues today. Four Hands Brewing Company. They are the absolute best. They've got that tasting room in downtown St. Louis, 1220 South 8th Street. The beautiful facility out there in Chesterfield, Kirkwood. I saw Kevin Lemp last week. Big shout out to my boy Kevin. Just taking St. Louis to the next level, one craft beer at a time. Pick up some of that Cam and Strick podcast, mango, lemonade, hard seltzer. Do it today. It's the best seltzer in the industry. Best seltzer on the market. You'll never have one that's better. Lordo's Diamonds. Ooh, Lordo's Diamonds. Get that special someone in your life, something special this holiday season. Stop on in, lordosdiamonds.com, right next to Truffles. 314-432-8008. Say hi to Mike and Jimmy Lordo. They are the best. If you have a $100,000 budget or a $500 budget or a $150 budget, they'll find something that works within your budget, and you'll get the same customer service. The guy coming in with $100,000 will be treated the same as the guy coming in with $500. Trust me. I've seen it. These guys are the absolute best. Great, great people. Blue Note Roofing, man. I always get excited when I talk about David Novak and Blue Note Roofing. Look for that yellow truck with the blue notes all over it. Gutters, soffit, fascia, everything. Windows. Roofing, obviously, that's his bread and butter. Wherever you are, he will come to you. 314-920-5713. 314-920-5713. If you need me to make the introduction to David for you, reach out to me. I can do that. He is the best roofer in the industry, ready to take your call. He'll talk pucks with you. He loves talking pucks. He's been a Blues fan for so long, but he's also one of the top and premier roofers in the state, in the region, really. Blue Note Roofing. All right, let's step aside, and we'll bring in Darren Dreger from TSN, longtime insider in the National Hockey League. Been with TSN forever. We're going to talk about some things with Darren, man. Looking forward to that. He joins me next here on Hockey Sense, brought to you by First Community. I'm Andy Strickland. Thanks for hanging out, as always. Great to have Darren Dreger with us, as always. Now we do it on video. I was just telling him I feel like I'm on insider trading here, Drake. So I don't know if I could do my best, impression. You guys have some great hosts who do all the stuff there. So I don't know if I could be as good as those guys. But how much do you enjoy that? And how much pressure is it to come up with something every week there, Darren?
Well, it's not like the good old days pre-social media, right? Where literally it was like shooting fish in a barrel.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, you could pretty much call any coach, general manager, player, or agent, and over the course of a week, you'd come up with 10 different storylines that were worthy of insider information. Now that social media exists, all the great beat reporters have access to that information in most cases quicker than I would, right? And sometimes it's injury related. It can be trade related, right? If a player isn't on the ice or you're paying attention and you see a player walk out with his sticks, well, that's normally a red flag that there's something going on. So it's gotten more difficult, but so has the investment of the hockey fan in wanting that information. And because of social media, because of, podcasts, like yours and Cam's. I've got one with Ray Ferraro. Access to information and opinion and entertainment has never been more accessible than it is right now. So from an insider perspective, yeah, it's good because we have so many different vehicles to use, but it's also more challenging to get the real juicy stuff because a lot of times it's already been covered.
I know. It's not like the old days with the hot stove between periods with JD and like Al Strachan and those.
Used to love that.
I did too, man. They used to serve toasted ravioli at the Blues games back in the late 90s, early 2000, and they'd bring them out between the second and third period, and everyone would gather around the TV and watch the hot stove, So
yeah. Old Strack was fun to watch, man. Like combative, opinionated. He'd shoot from the hip every single week. Yeah, and he's still like that. I haven't talked to Al Strachan in a while, but the last time I did, he's still an ornery cuss. He just is. But that was a part of it. And then to your point, you had John Davidson who knew everything and knew everyone.
Yeah.
And Scotty Morrison, go down the list of all the great people that passed through the old hot stove. So, I mean, and honestly, Andy, that's where insider trading and the role of the insider, I think, actually evolved. I give Bob McKenzie credit as being the original insider, and the reason guys like me and Friedman and Sarah Valley and Chris Johnson, Pierre LeBrun exist. But a lot of that was spun from what we saw on a weekly basis on Hockey Night in Canada with the hot stove.
Yeah. I had Al Strachan on maybe a year ago or so, and we had a fun conversation, man. I mean, I asked him so many questions because everyone has like an opinion on Al Strachan, and I had never really interviewed him before, so we had a great conversation, though it was a lot of fun. But hey, real quick, the hot stove back in the day on Hockey Night in Canada, would they have a different panel for the late game as they would in the early game, or no?
I mean, that's a good question. I don't think so. But I think it was shrunk down. I don't know that JD stayed for both games.
Yeah.
Maybe Strack did. Did they use maybe a Western Conference journalist or somebody like that? I don't recall. I mean, growing up, I for the most part watched the Eastern games, even though I grew up in the West. I mean, I lived in a house where it was Boston or Toronto. I mean, that was kind of how the house was split. My mom is French Canadian, so she tried to be a Habs fan, but the rest of the family wouldn't allow her to be that. But primarily, we stayed with the early games, so I'd have to do a bit of research on that.
Hey, Connor McDavid is just he's incredible. And listen, I've got an 8-year-old son who plays, trying to convince McDavid that there was ever anybody as good or better than him. Like you're just not going to do it with these kids nowadays.
No,
I'm not so sure there was. I mean, listen, Gretzky's Gretzky, and he's always going to be the GOAT for that reason. But when it's all said and done, what is this guy's numbers going to look like? He's already at 1,000 games. He's averaging more than an assist per game. And his assist last night in overtime was just absolutely incredible. Like he's certainly one of the most fun players to watch ever.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the no-look backhand pass to Darnell Nurse, and boom, game over. I mean, to call him special is not being sound enough or giving Connor McDavid enough credit. And, Andy, this bugs me. When we talk about generational players, how many generational players can there be in a generation? If you're a generational player, then there probably is one, and then there's the rest, right? Well, it feels like in the era of Connor McDavid, that's the top of the mountain. And that's saying something when you look around the league and you see Austin Matthews and, hey, there's Nate McKinnon doing what Nate McKinnon does, and Mikko Rantanen. I mean, go down the list of all the great players that we're blessed with on a nightly basis in the National Hockey League. But as I was reminded last night, as I'm watching McDavid, secure the 1,000th point in the second period, early in the second, and then gets the second point of the evening in overtime, I'm reminded of the number of games that it took Wayne Gretzky to hit 1,000 points.
God, I know.
And McDavid was 659 games.
Yeah.
Right? So he's fourth all time behind Bossy and behind Mario. And then you've got Wayne Gretzky at the top of the food chain. Ooh, boy. I mean, that's what puts it in perspective for me, because the great one played, as we know, we don't have to go down this road, but in an era where, I mean, you could water ski behind offensive players through the neutral zone. Obstruction? What's obstruction? Mm-hmm. I mean, you could do anything in that era. So it's way, way, way different. And so that's why when you try and bridge eras, and you made an excellent point with your son, my son, who's 23 now, played a decent level of hockey, but he grew up on video watching Pavel Bure and then got to watch Pavel Datsyuk. And so those were the players, even though he never saw Pavel Bure play live, the video evidence of how good a player he was, that's what I always encourage the younger people. Okay, just there's lots of video of Wayne Gretzky, go watch it. There's tons of video of Mario Lemieux. There's some video of Mike Bossy. Just watch it. I mean, these were tremendous era-driven players, but Connor McDavid is the generational player for me.
And just to stay on this real quick, I like it when these lists come out, because I don't think Mike Bossy gets enough credit for how great he was, because he didn't have the longevity. But tell the people, Darren, like this guy was as good as we've ever seen in terms of putting the puck in the net, right?
Well, I always concede to the guys that played at the highest level and didn't have to be the best point getters, top point getters, but played again in that era against some spectacular talent like Mike Bossy, and beyond the obvious of Wayne, Mario, clearly, you know, I think the number of conversations I've had with Dave Poulin over the years, former colleague, now of course with the Ottawa Senators, and I'm not here to say that Pooley would put Bossy ahead of Gretzky or Lemieux, but when you listen to a guy like that, Dave Poulin, who played as responsibly as you can and generated a fair amount of offense over his tenure in the National Hockey League, and he talks about how challenging it was and how great Mike that's I mean, I get goosebumps just talking about it right now, because I'm like, I just wish I'm old enough that I got to see Mike Bossy play at his highest level. Mm-hmm. But back then I wasn't old enough to embrace what I was seeing, and really focused on how good he was from a knowledge perspective. You know what I'm saying, Andy? Like you and I, you know, hey, we didn't play in the National Hockey League, but we've got a good knowledge base of the game. Yeah. You know, structurally, details, all of this stuff. You know, you don't have to play in the National Hockey League to understand how the National Hockey League game is played. So that's my public service announcement on behalf of you and I and the guys that didn't play but talk about it. Mm-hmm. But now when I watch Bossy, not just the goals, just the overall game, I'm like, geez, I wish I was old enough and experienced enough back then to truly appreciate how good he was.
Yeah, and it's crazy how many players who would have said when Datsyuk was in his prime that he's the best player in the game. You know what I mean? Like if you talk to players, even like when he was playing and he was at his best, they were like, this guy's the best player in the game. And probably doesn't get the credit for being the best player of his generation. But a lot of former players would certainly say that he was right there. I saw Ovechkin play live last week. He scored 2 goals. And this guy, as long as he can still shoot the puck and guys can get it to him, I mean, we talk about McDavid, like 2,000 points is certainly within reach. It wouldn't surprise anyone if he got to 2,000 points when it's all said and done.
Yeah.
Ovi, what's his goal total going to be? I mean, how long is he going to want to play? Can he get to 1,000 goals? Drinks?
5 years ago, I wouldn't have just chuckled. It would have been a knee-slapping guffaw at your expense, because it would have been ridiculous to even suggest that, right? I mean, 5 years ago, I was one of the naysayers. I didn't think that Ovechkin would catch Wayne. I just didn't.
Same here.
I couldn't compute that. And yet here we are, start of this season, 42 goals away. And you're sitting there going, okay, well, he's going to play at least this year and next year. So he's going to break the record. And now you look at the start that he's had for the Washington Capitals, and maybe he does it this year. It's not impossible. Of course it's not impossible. I still feel it's a tad unlikely. 42 goals is a lot. Yeah. But I'm not betting against Ovi. And let's have a little bit of fun here for a moment. So I'll share an internal debate that we had the other day. It kind of made me angry, just trying to defend myself. So the question was asked, would there be an amendment to the criteria of Hall of Fame? So we know there's the waiting period, right? Even for the first ballot guys, there's a waiting period before you qualify. When Alex Ovechkin and or Sidney Crosby retire, should it be automatic? Boom. There's no waiting period. If you're done, you're going straight into the Hall of Fame. My response was, yeah. I mean, again, in my generation, aside from being young and watching the greatness of Wayne Gretzky and all the players we've already talked about, what are you waiting for? I mean, they're clear-cut Hall of Famers. I mean, are you disrespecting, the class of 7 that are going to get inducted in the 3 years before they're eligible? Like, what are we doing? And I was in the vast minority of the group of people at TSN who said, no, they got to wait like everybody else. I was a bit surprised.
No, I wouldn't. Did Gretzky wait?
I should know this. I don't think he did.
I don't think he did either. No.
I don't think he did.
I don't think he did. And these would be the 2 guys that would be closest to being able to say they're at that level.
Yeah.
Right. So,
Yeah.
and I don't know if it's going to line up that way, but it would be great to have both those guys go in together into the Hall of
would
Fame.
be.
You know, but and I know people that were up there this past weekend. You're there all the time, at least in Toronto when it's Hall of Fame weekend. How much fun is that for you to be around?
Yeah. No, it is. And to be honest, I didn't go this year.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a select group, as it should be, of people who are actually invited into the hall for Monday's ceremony. I mean, it should be. It should be mostly reserved for friends and family of those being inducted. But I watched intently from home, as I always want to. And you know, aside from Jeremy Roenick, who just is typical JR, wears his emotions on his sleeve, as honest as there is, just let it all hang out, man. He just threw it out there. Loved every second of that. I guess I was struck by Pavel Datsyuk. You know, we just mentioned him in terms of the player that he was. I was struck because let's just put it in perspective here. We know that the language is an issue for Pavel. We know this, right? Mm-hmm. It has been his entire career. And he's back in Russia. He's raising his family. So he probably doesn't speak English all that often unless he's, you know, conversing with former teammates and whatnot. And I just felt like his speech was so to the point. He'd thanked the people that were obviously impactful in his life. Emotionally, he spoke of his family, you know, the people that mentored him. You know, I just thought it was terrific. And to refer to his wife and his children as his wings, again, in English as opposed to in Russia. In Russia, it probably flows from him. And he's a very smart man. I don't know if you know Pavel that well. He's an intelligent dude. He really is. So that was one of the takeaways for me. I mean, every class has its moments. I thought the women were terrific. Colin Campbell, you know, has been involved every level of hockey. Of course, David Poile, deserving and whatnot. But the takeaway from Monday's induction ceremony, aside from JR, was Pavel Datsyuk. I thought he was spot on.
Yeah. And to answer your question, no, because he didn't talk much when he was here.
Not much.
But I mean, some of his teammates I know real well, guys like Kurt Malpe and McCarty and Brett Hall and those guys. And the way they speak about him is absolutely incredible. Getting back to Crosby, and listen, Cam and I talked about this a lot last year. You know, like I just feel like as a hockey fan, I want to see this guy play in the Stanley Cup playoffs. We're being deprived of a couple of players not playing in the playoffs right now. Brady Tkachuk is one for me. I want to see this guy play in a playoff series. But specifically Crosby, at least while he's still capable of being a point-per-game guy and playing at a high level, are we just going to let him just kind of waste the last final years of his career missing the playoffs with an aging Pittsburgh team? Or do you think this is realistic? Do you think he really could go to Kyle Dubas? Because that's how it's going to have to go. He's going to have to say, hey, listen, it's okay. Go ahead and move me. I want to go. And then he can kind of pick and choose where he goes. But how do you see this playing out in Pittsburgh?
Yeah. Well, I hope the scenario that you've just explained does play out. And with all due respect to the Legion of Great Pittsburgh Penguins and Sidney Crosby fans, I'm on board with you. Anybody who watches him play, and I watch a lot of their games, he's still got it. Oh, yeah. He's still got it. Like, he's just so good, so smart, so dangerous, just, you know, a complete team player that it's hard to envision Sidney Crosby going out, you know, with the Pittsburgh Penguins as a non-playoff team. And look, now we can understand and appreciate how and why Kyle Dubas got the length of contract that he got as top executive with the Pittsburgh Penguins. It's because he's got a project perhaps unlike no other. You know, we just talked about the Hall of Fame. Crosby, Malkin, maybe Chris Letang. I mean, those are Hall of Fame players, right? I mean, so how do you manage a rebuild around those pieces? Unless, as you explain, Andy, it starts with Sid. He comes to Kyle at some point through Pat Brasana's agent and says, you know, we just agreed to sign the extension, but we didn't see it playing out like this. So, you know, here's our list, and that list is going to be incredibly short if there's ever a list. And we don't know that. This is just speculation. But I can see it because of how fiercely competitive Sidney is. Fiercely competitive. All he wants to do is win. But he's also one of the most unselfish athletes I have ever met. So rather than look in the mirror and say, you deserve another chase for the Stanley Cup, he might look around that dressing room and go, I can't leave these guys high and dry. I can't do it. I'm sorry. If there's a problem, then I'm part of the problem. And that's the way it's going to be. Again, from a hockey perspective, a fan standpoint, Andy, I hope in the offseason that there is a change of heart and he does go to the Penguins brass and say, I got more left and I appreciate what has to happen here. Imagine what you're getting in return for Sidney Crosby.
Whatever you
Imagine.
want.
But it's not going to be a free-for-all, right?
Sure.
Like he's not going, it's not going to be 31 teams vying for the services of Crosby. That's not legit.
Right.
But maybe he is more flexible. If he doesn't have a whole lot of time left, but he's probably got more time than most people think because of how well he looks after himself. But from a hockey fan standpoint, I'm hoping there's a change of heart, but I know the man and I doubt it.
Yeah, well, the compensation can't just be based on his production on the ice, but he puts millions of dollars into that owner's pocket, whoever got him too, So, I mean, it would be unbelievable. And
he has been the most underpaid player.
Yeah.
I don't want to say NHL history because you can't say that when you compare to the past eras and the money those men didn't make but deserved. So I won't say in history, but in a salary cap era, for sure.
Hey, two more things for you real quick. Any surprises that you could see land on Canada's Four Nations roster that people aren't talking about? I've thrown out Colton Parayko a couple times just because you know, with Army being here, and I know they're not just looking just to build an all-star team, but then I talked to Rick Bowness, and he's like, hey, you need to have skill, because the more skill you have on your roster, it's hard in a short tournament just to develop chemistry, and if you expect guys to be able to just immediately be able to gel with one another, you want some individual skill on your team too, but you're going to have Cale Makar. Do you need a bunch of power play guys on the back end? I'm curious who maybe we're missing, who you would maybe identify as a guy that you would have on there.
Well, I heard that segment that you and Cam did, and I hadn't heard Colton Parayko's name out there. But in fairness to the process here, Andy, I think Doug and company have done a real good job of keeping a seal on that, right? Team USA's approach is a little bit different. My colleague Pierre LeBrun did something on Cole Caulfield being on the outside looking in at Team USA, which is probably going to rankle, those supporters of Cole Caulfield. But you're right. I mean, it's not an all-star team. It's a Four Nations championship, and you better have every box ticked. So when you threw out Parayko, and I know you didn't do that haphazardly. It's not like you just pulled that out of your hip and said, "Oh, what about Colton Parayko?" Yeah. So it got me thinking, and I can appreciate that. And I'll throw another name at you, like Chris Tanev. With the Toronto Maple, and for the reason that Parayko would make some sense.
Similar.
Tanev, you might have some concerns because of the wear and tear on the body and where he's at, but all he does is shut down players. Shot blocking, penalty killing. All of the good things that you need from a defensive defenseman, IQ, those guys have that. So I can see a place where the brass of Canada embraces that type of player. Is it going to be Parayko? Is it going to be Tanev? Somebody threw Pietrangelo at me. I might have him a little bit higher on that food chain. But we don't know because they're not sharing. And I'm okay with that. I'm fine with that. It just speaks to, the one thing Canada doesn't have is the obvious, and that is a bona fide number one. I can make a case all day long for the guy in St. Louis, Bennington, all day long. And then you look at Hill and you look at Kemper when he's healthy and some of the other pieces. The problem is we in Canada can't look past what they've got in the U.S. And it starts with Connor Hellebuck. I'm like, all right, well, that's fine. I appreciate the comparison. But that doesn't mean that what Canada is putting in the crease is going to be awful. So if it's not Vezina winning, fine. Then you build your team accordingly, and you make sure that your blue line isn't an all-star blue line. It's a blue line that can win a championship, because ultimately that's what you're trying to do. So I don't know if I've answered your question.
No, you have.
I'm on board with you.
And again, it's no all these goalies, you get to this level of goalie, they're all capable of having a great week, 2 weeks, whatever, you know. And Hellebuyck
Sure.
hasn't
Yeah.
had great playoffs in the past, and you just never
No.
know. It's not a guarantee that he
Yeah.
would. So we'll see how that. I remember Jay Bouwmeester being named to 2014 Olympic team, and I don't know if everyone had him on the
Yep.
list then
Yeah.
too, but he was a guy who could defend and shut down opposing. And he and Petro were really good together playing. You know, they brought that chemistry from St. Louis together with Hockey Canada too. Last thing for you, Jim Montgomery, anybody really on the hot seat right now? They lose big to Boston last night. I'm watching Brad Marchand the other day. Doesn't have an extension. You just wonder at his age, what's realistic. I see Tampa Bay, obviously, they move on from Stamkos. I know those are hard decisions, but sometimes you got to make hard decisions as an organization to move forward, you know?
Yeah, no question. So I'm fumbling with a notepad here, and the reason I wanted to grab it was because I wrote this down when I was, last night going through some of the post-game commentary. And this is Nikita Zadorov with the Boston Bruins. And in a 10, 15-second soundbite, he used this phrasing, quote, "We lost every battle. Soft on the puck, soft everywhere. We were embarrassed."
Wow.
So that's the message from the dressing room of the Boston Bruins. So you ask if Jim Montgomery is on the hot seat, how can he not be?
Mm-hmm.
How can he not be? I mean, they're floundering in trying to look for some chemistry. And I'm a big fan of Monty. He's coached some really good teams. This isn't a good team. They've got a few good players, Brad Marchand among them.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think Charlie McAvoy's been as good as he was hoping to be. Of course, you've got David Pastrnak. You had the Jeremy Swayman distraction of the contract through camp in the preseason, all of that. The one thing that I wonder about Monty's MO is, coaches will bring out the blender, as we like to say, when things aren't going right. And they'll start experimenting with line changes and different personnel and all of that. Good, bad, or otherwise. Like, Monty has his finger on that blender 60 minutes every single game.
I know.
Like, they could be up by 3 goals and he's changing lines and he's doing this, he's doing that. And I've always appreciated that about him. But there was a comment recently from Brad Marchand where you could tell he was trying to be respectful, and it didn't come across as being entirely critical, but it did identify that it's impossible to develop any sort of chemistry when you don't have consistency with your lines. And he's in the final year of his contract.
Yeah.
It's going one of two ways. Either he's getting fired or he's going to get contract extension. And based on the way this team has played, yeah, he's on the hot seat.
Well, I asked him the other day, and knowing Monty for a long time, and I just said, listen, you guys, President Trophy winners 2 years ago, and, last year got off to that great start. I go, what's the difference? He goes, yeah, but what were we doing in June the last 2 years? And so I think he's almost thinking like, hey, maybe some short-term early season adversity maybe will mean better results come playoff time if he can even get there. But this team's not the same team they had, I don't think, even the last year or two. And they don't appear to be good enough to be able to put up the numbers that they put up in terms of points.
Sweeney's got work to do, though, Andy, right? Like, I'm a fan of Elias Lindholm and how he plays, but that's a lot of money for what you're going to get out of that player.
Yeah.
And then I just talked about the quote from Zadorov, and that's the reason the market shrunk on him. He believes he's a top 4, maybe even a top pairing guy, and he can't be. Consistently, he can't be. So they've got a lot of money tied up, and they have a ton of work to do and don't have a whole lot of cap space to work with.
The Blues had no business losing that game the other night. And I know they have injuries and whatnot, but they kind of almost gave it away too. So, all right, good stuff. When's Austin Matthews coming back? We don't know yet, I guess.
We don't know. I mean, the hope was by internal personnel that he'd be ready for tomorrow against McDavid and the Oilers, but that's not the case. And in part, it's because they have a light schedule this week. So I guess they're thinking, all right, well, you're not 100%. So why not just take another game off? And that'll give us an extended period to continue with treatment and rest. But yeah, just to wrap up, I mean, Leafs Nation is getting a little bit antsy, and only because it was first deemed several days ago to be non-serious. They just needed a little bit of time for the problem to settle down. So normally that tells you it's like a tweak or muscle related, tissue related. And now all of a sudden you start drifting into the 14-day range and counting. And you're like, okay, maybe we better poke around here. I don't like getting into the specifics of injury for public consumption. I don't think that's fair to the players.
Yeah.
But it does make you wonder if there isn't something more going on.
Yeah, for sure. I caught the last 5 minutes of that Washington game, though. They can be fun to watch, though, even without Matthews. When they turn it on, they've got so much firepower. So, all right, good stuff, Darren. I appreciate it as always.
Okay, buddy. Thanks for having me, Andy.
Yeah, you got it. Talk soon. That's Darren Dreger on this edition of Hockey Sense. Always appreciate talking with Dregs from TSN. Good stuff, too. A lot of interesting things. We'll see how this plays out moving forward with a number of these different teams. Arco Construction taking St. Louis hockey to the next level, one ice rink at a time. Jeff Cook, John Comlos, you got that beautiful facility out there in Chesterfield. 2-sheet facility, 4-sheet facility, Centene Community Ice Center, where the Blues practice. We love it. They also built the Putt Shack and Topgolf. So they bring the fun to St. Louis. Yes, they do. Arco Construction, taking St. Louis hockey to the next level, one ice rink at a time. All right, this is Hockey Sense brought to you by First Community. We'll step aside. Jammer, Jamal Mayers. Looking forward to his comments. He joins me next in studio. Don't go anywhere. All right, Jamal Mayers with us for our weekly visit. Jammer, great to have you with us.
Nice to be here.
I didn't mean to leave you out there in the green room as long as I did. I apologize about that.
It's all good. Maybe I had a couple of errands to run. Time got away from me.
Well, we had Darren Dreger on. I mean, so many
Nice.
things to get into because of, Connor McDavid. Like, you tried convincing Crew or who's 12, maybe 13 now? How old is he?
Just turned 12.
Just turned 12. So I've got an 8-year-old, trying to convince them that there's ever been anybody better than this guy, it would be almost impossible to do, even though I always keep Gretzky as the GOAT. He'll always be the GOAT, in my opinion, and his numbers speak for themselves. The fact that he got to 1,000 games in 452 games is absolutely insane. But it's also insane that McDavid gets there in 659. He has 660 assists. He's averaging more than an assist per game. And he gets to 1,000 points in 659 games. He is... This guy, 2,000 points, what's he going to end with, He's
got to stay healthy.
Yeah.
I think that that's critical. He's a special player.
Yeah.
To be able to do what he does in today's game and produce the way he's produced, I think he was the third fastest, I believe, to fourth.
Mike Bossy, too, which people don't
No, I think he beat him.
know.
Are you sure?
Fourth fastest.
Okay.
Yeah, Gretzky, Lemieux, Bossy.
Okay.
Bossy had that 10-year run where he was just ridiculous.
Well, those are amazing company to be in.
And
A
he
different era.
didn't beat him by much. I'll let you know the exact
Yeah, let's do that.
numbers here. I'll tell you that here in just a second. Go ahead and keep.
You know what? It's just exciting. It's fun to watch him play. It's fun to see the pace that he's on and the ability to create. Remember a few years ago, I think he was challenged by Draisaitl to score more goals, so he scored more goals. And he thought it was cool to get a bunch of assists, so he got 100 assists.
Yeah.
I think it's fun how you watch special players find new ways and new reasons to motivate themselves.
All right, so Gretzky did it in 424 games. I may have been off by a game. Lemieux, 513. Mike Bossy, 656. So 3 games faster. Or 3 games faster than McDavid.
Nice.
Mike Bossy, you don't even talk. That's why I like these lists. I just said that to Dreger because it gets people realizing how good that Mike Bossy was.
Context is important, right?
Yeah.
He got injuries and things affected him, but he was unbelievably dominant.
Yeah. You want to see Crosby play for another team?
No.
You don't?
I don't.
See, I do. I just don't like seeing this guy still be able to play at a high level and we don't get to see him play in the playoffs.
Yeah, that's tough. I think they have to retool things a little bit. How much can they turn around in a year? I'm not quite sure.
Mm-hmm.
But it would be very strange. The only place I could see him going, honestly, would be Colorado.
People are saying that the automatic connection with he and Nathan McKinnon. But you never know, man. He's probably if he goes to Kyle Dubas and says, "I'm willing to go somewhere else," and I'm sure it's a very short list as to where he would go. Would he go to Vegas? Would he go to Tampa?
You know what? If I'm Crosby,
Yeah.
Go to
Would he go to
Go
Florida?
to Toronto.
Would he go to Florida? Would he go to Toronto?
Go to Toronto.
Yeah.
You go there and you win.
Yeah. I know.
Why not?
So those are the Florida, Vegas.
Those are easy choices.
Those are easy choices.
I think guys like him can make bold choices.
Mm-hmm. Colorado is playing better as of late. They've won 3 straight. McKinnon's leading the league in scoring. Rantanen obviously is a great player. They've got Makar on the back end. Goaltending will always be a little bit of a question. We'll see.
They have 3 of the top 6 goal scorers, points producers.
Yeah,
in the
I
league.
know. And Vegas was there a week or two ago with the hot start that they got off to. They had a bunch of guys that were leading the league in scoring too. So goaltending, we all know how much goaltending and how important that will be down the stretch. You can have all the scorers you want, but if you can't keep the puck out of your net, you're just not going to win. But they're good too. And it's funny because even Jim Montgomery, who's on the hot seat, and I just talked to Dreger about that, he's got to be. Terrible loss last night again to Dallas. And then you have, Nikita Zadorov coming out and ripping the team about how soft they are. I'm just thinking of what he told me the other day in respect to Colorado right now. It's like it's all about June. You know what I mean? Like Boston had the great regular seasons for 2 years in a row, and they weren't playing in June. So a great regular season can only take you so far in reality. So
I think there's a certain bucket of teams, probably 10 teams that have a long-term vision.
Mm-hmm.
It's a known quantity that they're going to make the playoffs. It's more about, are they preparing themselves and peaking at the right time when it matters?
Mm-hmm.
And so there's less panic in those groups for the way they're playing. I think Boston's outside of that situation.
Yeah.
I think Colorado is in that situation.
Colorado's got a better roster than Boston.
Yeah, we forget about who's missing from the roster,
Mm-hmm.
right?
For Colorado.
For Colorado.
Yeah.
No, for Boston.
Oh, well, both
And
of
Jim
them.
Montgomery.
Yeah.
And what he's having to deal with in the last few years.
Mm-hmm.
Bergeron, Chara, Krejci. There's a lot of guys.
Yeah, some elite players. And they're not getting great play out of some guys right now that are there. Brad Marchand's got the contract extension looming. We'll see what happens with that. I think sometimes you just have to make tough decisions. I know he's your captain, but he's also, 36 years old right now. You can't be just giving 36-year-old 3-year deals. That's why I didn't blame Tampa Bay when they moved on from Steven Stamkos. I know he's a legendary, iconic player there. But the best GMs know when to move on from certain guys. And I know it's going to be short-term pain. The fans will get mad at you. But, you bring Jake Gensel on board, scores another couple of goals last night. They are maybe hurting short-term, but long-term, maybe it's the best decision for the organization.
Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's the wrong one. I think San Jose made a mistake when they moved on from Joe Pavelski.
Mm.
He proved he had 5 more years of producing great numbers. So I think you're right. I don't think it's an absolute science.
No.
It's not a perfect situation. I do agree with you though in the Stamkos situation. I think they moved on at the right time, as painful as it is to see him leave. I thought Pav was done just because the game was trending faster. He doesn't skate so well, not a big guy, but he's so crafty, he found a way.
And they had a bunch of other fast guys there in Dallas.
Yeah, they did.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. So he could figure out, he plays off of people well. So I think it's the newness for Stammer has been really difficult for him, more than you think he anticipated.
Yeah.
And I think it's taken him longer. I wouldn't be surprised if you just eliminate the first half of the season and just look at his points in the second half. I think he's going to end up a point a game on the second half.
He'll turn it on.
Yeah.
And the power play will get better. But Marchessault, same thing out of Vegas. I know there was a lot of talk about that, but he got a 5-year deal from Nashville. Vegas wasn't going to give him a 5-year deal. And nobody could fault Vegas for not giving him 5 years. You know what I mean?
No, I think.
And he's not in the same category as Stamkos either, but he did win a Conn Smythe, and he's been a great player there. Scored 40 goals last season.
Yes. So his timing was right for him to make the right decision for him and his family.
Yeah.
And it didn't fit into the model of what Vegas had.
He's going to be okay.
Yeah.
As in the words of Cam Jansen, he'll be okay.
yeah.
He got a 5-year deal.
Yeah, exactly.
He's in Nashville.
Yeah, life's good.
Life is good.
It's a good league.
Yeah, it's a good league. That's what Jason Demeris said. He used to always say, this is the NHL.
That's it.
Nothing like being a player in the NHL, right?
Oh, like even when things are not good,
Yeah.
you're flying private, eating filet mignon, nice glass of wine.
Can you appreciate the moment, though, at the time?
I absolutely did.
You did.
After 30.
Because you
After
took
30.
you would take losses. You would be in a bad mood.
Yeah, but after 30, I think after you have kids, maybe it helped get you some perspective. And then you realize, for me at 30, you realize, am I playing till 32? Am I playing till 35? Like, it's coming. The end is coming. And so I feel like I was more intentional about enjoying the small things and helping other guys try to see the enjoyment. Because I think perhaps I had a little bit of regret in the sense of how hard I took it, how I didn't necessarily enjoy all of it while I was in my
But can you
20s.
ever be comfortable as an NHL player?
Not in my
There's
role.
always kids like coming to try to take your spot. And you know what
funny
I'm saying?
It's funny you say that. I used to say to Ryan Johnson all the time. Every training camp, it'd be you talking about these new kids coming in, going to take a roster spot. And I'd say, that guy's not taking my job. No chance.
Yeah.
And I was scared.
Yeah.
And that fear, 8, 9, 10 years in, is what drove us. And I include Johnny and RJ in that equation where we were like, no, we have value. We're willing to do the dirty stuff, kill penalties, block shots, get on the floor, do all those intangible things. That can be next year.
Yeah.
We'd always say that could be next year.
Yeah.
So,
And that was back when they had training camp fights and stuff like that. You could maybe flex a little bit more, a little easier to do so than in today's practices, I guess.
you sure can, you could still do it today. It's a different way, but I'll tell you exactly how you do it today.
Yeah.
Today, you go into training camp a week before, everyone's skating around, looks like shinny hockey. The guy from Switzerland looks amazing. And I'd be saying to myself, I am going to hammer that guy. I'm going to spend a shift just trying to go after him, not dirty, and hit him when he
Before camp.
I'm telling myself, when camp starts,
Yeah. Okay.
I'm doing this.
Sure.
And so, yeah, he looks good and skate a week before camp. There's no hitting.
Shinny.
Yeah, shinny. Of course he looks good. But I'm going to make a point, and either he responds to it or he gets intimidated. And to me, 9 times out of 10, had nothing to do with fighting. It just being really hard on people and physical would shine like a light to the organization where they're like, oh, that kid's not ready. He backed down or he shied away. And I was challenged in that.
I remember you fighting Doug Lynch in training camp, and he was
you remember
because he had a bloody face, and he was a defenseman though. So, what was that? Was that a scrimmage or a drill where you guys were just kind of? Do you even remember?
No, don't remember that.
You remember Doug Lynch?
No.
He came over in the Pronger deal
Okay.
in the Jeff Wiewitka. He was like
I like Jeff.
was like the big dog, I
Yeah.
guess, in the teal. He was a former first round pick.
First round
I think.
pick. Yep.
And Doug Lynch was a second round pick. Super nice guy. I don't think he ever played a game here. Maybe did. If he did, it was like less than a handful. And you guys did fight in training camp. But it wasn't, I don't think it was during a scrimmage, but you guys, you bloodied his nose. So if you want to look in the camera and apologize to Jeff.
Sorry. Is it Doug?
Doug Lynch.
Sorry, Doug. Apologize.
Maybe you were pissed that Pronger got traded or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I probably was.
You watched the game last night in Buffalo Blues Sabres?
A little bit of yes.
It's a tough. I mean, I know they've got injuries, and Broberg is a massive hole. I mean, not having Broberg has forced you to kind of like put P.O. Joseph in a top 4 role. He gets hurt last night. You're playing with 5D, essentially 4D. I don't think Perunovic saw hardly any ice in that third period. So now you're down to 4D. You don't have Robert Thomas. So, and you speak to this, please, as a center for a guy like Buchnevich, who has shown elite level play in the past as a winger. He can drive a line as a winger. I thought it was interesting. Ray Ferraro before the game said he looks like a player who's trying to look like a center when he's out there, But what's the most difficult part about it? Because he's going up against the other team's top centers defensively, right?
You just said it. The matchup's completely different, right? When you're sliding into a different hole, and he's more of a guy to me that plays off of people. But now he's asked to drive it. And not only drive it, but drive it against the other team's top players who are trying to stop you.
And he's been on the ice against the top player, but it's different as a center, right?
It's different as a center.
Yeah.
Like Thomas is able to hold on to the puck, buy time, create space. He plays off of him, And it's a different game where you have to be the one creating, and the attention is on you on the entries, and the attention is on you to make that play. And I think it makes you appreciate how good Thomas is
Yeah.
in a lot of respects.
Oh, no question about it. And as a winger, it's easier to play.
Oh,
And you can kind of rest between whistles. You know, face-off does take some energy, right, when you're taking face-offs all the time.
well, the work required when you lose the face-off
Mm-hmm.
is different. Depending on what style you play defensively, whether you're playing man-on-man or man and a half or in a swarm, which are the three different options, it's going to demand a lot more of you as a center, for sure.
Back-to-back third-period losses, you know, where you had the lead in the third and they lose both the games. That can be taxing mentally. It's getting a lot of attention today. I'm just curious your take, Colton. Jordan Kyrou, who I think has been playing decent hockey, like he's got points in 6 straight. I know the turnovers are magnified. Sometimes, you know, guys turn the puck over all the time. It just so happens when he's turning it over, Jamal, the puck's ending up in the back of the net. Some of them are fluky goals. But he is competing harder than we probably have ever seen him compete as an NHL player. You know, 50-50 pucks, board battles, all of that. He intercepts passes. Like, he brings that element offensively that no one else on the team really has without Thomas in the lineup. So he is a threat to score. He didn't play in the last 4.5 minutes. Does that surprise you? Or is that too early to go into a defensive mindset?
It does surprise me because I think at the end of the day, offensive players want to feel like they have earned the ability to make plays, that their leash is longer than others. Are they going to make mistakes and turn it over? Yeah, they are. But you have to allow them that grace. And it's different rules for different people for a reason. You don't think Patrick Kane in his prime was turning pucks over? Was creating, but the idea is he's going to create way more than he gives up.
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of have to live with the 2 or 3 turnovers. The unfortunate part, the margin for error is smaller for this group. So when Kyrou makes a mistake, it gets over magnified, in my opinion. The other thing I'll say is this: is it more important to make to show him a lesson, or is it more important to win the game? That's a balance only the coaches can answer.
Yeah.
And I would argue that there's more, that's a fine line where you're going to lose the player, lose the room in a sense, not completely, but in the sense that I'm like, he's our best creator, get him on the ice. Like, I don't want